Hey everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We are live, we're back, we're trying this again tonight. We messed it all up last night, but we're here. It's Thursday, February 27th. We're live from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas. We're on the radio at 987radio.com. No, we're at 98.7. Walk by Faith and 987radio.com is where we're streaming. We're also on all of our social media pages. And I just need a quick little update right quick to make sure that we've got sound. So I think we do. I'm hoping we got it fixed from last night. We had a little glitch in the computer. I don't really know. I restarted it in the middle of the show last night. And I don't know what happened, but it didn't work. It didn't work. And that's part of having a live show is sometimes you try it and sometimes it just doesn't work. And so what do you do? Hang on. I already got a message. So let's see. Yeah. All right. We're good to go tonight. We got sound. We're back on. And I was really disappointed last night too, because, we had a little one pass away with pneumonia that they acquired from measles yesterday. And I've had 2 or 3 people ask me today about, how's your week been? And I'm very optimistic, and I look forward to things, and I'm excited about wellness and all the things that goes along with wellness. And I just could, if I was going to be 100% honest, I just kept saying it's like, for the people that didn't understand what was going on, I said it's been fine. It's we've had a good week, whatever. But it wasn't very convincing, and for some of them that did know what was going on, it was like it sucked. It absolutely sucked that happened. And I can promise you that all the people involved in those sort of things, whether we're on the wellness side of it, and I said this last night, but none of the social media got it. So you guys that are on the radio, you're going to get kind of a repeat of last night's show, and maybe it'll make more sense the second time you hear it. But the whether you're in wellness or you're in sick care, whether you're working at the hospital or you're working in the clinics or the pediatricians or whatever, whenever something like that happens, it's just disheartening. It's just sad. It makes everybody sick. We feel, everybody here at the Rock Health and Wellness Center feels for the families of the people involved. All the people we send our heartfelt condolences out, and it's just it's very unfortunate. And so what do you do about it? What do you do when that happens? Because there's the masses of people that want to jump on a bandwagon and throw stones and all that sort of thing. And that's just not what we're about at the Rock Health and Wellness Center. It's not what we're about on Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. What we're trying to do every single night is share with you information that helps you live a healthier life. That's what we're trying to do. And I know that we're not talking to the masses of people. And one of my ladies, I told her what the show was going to be about tonight. And she was like, "You're probably going to get a lot of calls." So I just kind of laughed. I was like, "Probably not going to get a lot of calls because there's not a lot of people listening to us. But for you guys that are listening to us, you mean the world to me. And you really, like, I don't care if there's 10 people listening to the show or if there's 10 million people listening to the show. I want the listeners to be able to take what we talk about here, and I hope that you understand that whatever I say, whatever I'm teaching, I hope you understand I'm teaching it from the best absolute truth that I know. I really am. I'm trying to teach you everything I know about health, and it's free, and it's right here on the radio, and social media, and it's there for you guys to take. So sometimes when you're talking about things like this, and I don't want to be insensitive whatsoever to the family involved with that, or any other family that's going through any of that stuff right now. I just want to use the topics that are current that are in the news, that are in our communities right now. And I want to try to teach as well as I can about the truth about how it actually works in your body. Because I think there's some scripture that says something to the effect of, my people will perish for lack of knowledge. And I think it's in Isaiah or something, but I really do believe that we are there. I believe we could be better if we understood better how things work. And sometimes when you bring that information to people and you tell them exactly how it works to the best of what you know, it's contradictory to what they know. And tonight's going to be contradictory to some of the things that you might know out there. I promise you, because it's controversial and it's emotional and all the rest of that stuff. But I think it's fair that we talk about it so that you understand it, because you're not going to get it from the health department. They're not. I mean, it's disgusting to me that that's the name of that group right there, the health department, and they don't talk about health, and they put out all these press releases, and they're full of you talk about misinformation, but they're just not telling the whole truth. And I think a lot of times when doctors talk to patients, they don't talk to patients like the patients can handle the truth. That happens all the time. That's why you have the term arthritis, because of the fact that the doctor really doesn't want to break it down for you and tell you exactly what's going on. But I want to break down pneumonia tonight. I want to break down pneumonia, not necessarily for this little girl or boy or whatever, this little child that passed away, not necessarily for that person, but for everyone out there. Whether you may be 80 years old and you want to know about pneumonia, like, what is pneumonia? How do you get pneumonia? What is going on? And does, in this particular case, does measles cause pneumonia? And I'm going to tell you that the answer to that question is no. It's not. It's measles does not cause pneumonia. Pneumonia is a result of an overactive or altered active immune system. Your immune system causes pneumonia. Okay? And that's something that I want to teach. So we're just going to get into it tonight. We're going to talk about it, and I'm going to share it with you, and I hope it helps you. But I'm going to read it. I'm going to read this passage, and this is what I tried to do last night, but I'm going to read it right off the National Institutes of Health so that you understand that I'm not making this up. And so I want to read it to you right here. And I just I don't know what the search was, but it's the name of this article here is Pneumonia Pathology, and it's written by several doctors that have affiliations in Atlanta and at the University of California. And this is what we were trying to cover last night. But I want to come down here to, if you go all the way down and you get down into pathophysiology, which is the pathology of the whole thing, right? How your body responds. I want to read this paragraph, and then I want to spend the rest of the show breaking this paragraph down so that you have a better feel for it and understand it. And it says this. It says, the resident macrophages serve to protect the lung from foreign pathogens. Ironically, the inflammatory reaction triggered by these very macrophages is what is responsible for the pathological and clinical findings seen in pneumonia. The macrophages engulf these pathogens and trigger signal molecules or cytokines like TNF-alpha, interleukin-8, and interleukin-1 that recruit inflammatory cells like neutrophils to the site of infection. They also serve to present these antigens to the T cells that trigger both cellular and humoral defense mechanisms, activate complement from form antibodies against these organisms. This in turn causes inflammation of the lung parenchyma and makes the lining capillaries leaky, which leads to exudative congestion and underlines the pathogenesis of pneumonia. And I want to read that last part one more time, and then I want to break this paragraph down for you so that you can understand it, okay? This last part right here, in turn, causes inflammation of the lung parenchyma, and that's what we're talking about, the alveolar sac and inside the lung, the little tiny air sac. So we're talking about the air sac and the tissue around the air sac. That's what that means, okay? This in turn causes inflammation in the lung, air sac, and tissue around the air sac and makes the lining capillaries leaky. The capillaries are the blood supply. That's what the blood supply is, what has the plasma. And this inflammation makes that leaky, which leads to this plasma leaking into the alveolar sac. And it underlines the pathogenesis of pneumonia. And so what I'm saying is, when you say, does a virus cause pneumonia? No, it does not. What the virus does is it causes the immune system to respond to it. That's what the virus does. The virus causes the immune system to respond to it. Once the immune system responds to the virus, if the immune system over-responds or has some sort of altered response to the virus, then you will end up with an increased amount of plasma in your lung, which will fill up your lung and you won't be able to breathe, and that's what we call pneumonia. And pneumonia is, according to this same article, pneumonia is a group of things. It's been defined as an infection of the lung parenchyma, again, rather than looking at it as a single disease. Healthcare professionals must remember that pneumonia is an umbrella term for a group of syndromes caused by a variety of organisms resulting in a varied manifestations. It's an umbrella term. Just like arthritis is an umbrella term. It's easier to say that. It's easy to just say that when you're talking to the community, when you're posting this stuff on the local news Facebook pages, and you're getting everybody stirred up. It's easier to just say, well, it's just pneumonia. That you got pneumonia because you had a virus, and then that's why your lungs filled up with fluid. And it's like, wait a minute. Let's just say, wait a minute for a second. Let's say we gave that virus to 500 people, and only, let's say, 5 of them developed pneumonia. Is it fair to say if you gave the virus to 500 people and only 5 of them developed pneumonia, is it fair to say that the virus causes pneumonia? Well, I mean, I get it. You wouldn't have gotten pneumonia had you not gotten the virus. I understand the argument right there. Then that's a fair argument. You wouldn't have gotten the virus if you hadn't you wouldn't have gotten pneumonia if you hadn't gotten the virus. Fair enough. That's a fair argument. But it wasn't the virus that caused the pneumonia. What caused the pneumonia was the overactivity of your immune system. And that's what I want to break down for you as we go through this tonight. That's what I really want you to understand. Because you have control over that. See, you don't have control over whether or not you're going to get exposed to a virus. Regardless of what your status is of vaccination or anything else, you don't have any way of knowing if you're going to get exposed to a virus or not. But you do have a way to control the level of inflammation that's inside your body when you do get exposed to the virus. And that's what health is. That's health care. Health care is preparing our bodies for the whatever it is that we are going to be facing today. That's what health care is. And you and I, us together, and our children, we all have the ability to decrease our inflammation. And when we do not decrease our inflammation, we end up with worse outcomes. And it's the same exact thing. I had this same conversation with a patient of mine that has MS this week. And I asked her, are you taking your fish oil? And she's like, no. And I said, why? She's like, because I've got so many other things that I take. I just don't want to take anything else. And I'm like, okay. And it's like, why is the MS flaring up? What is the flare up? Well, the flare up is the immune system. What is the flare up in asthma? What is the flare up in this? What is the flare up in psoriasis in your legs? What is the flare up in cancer? What is the flare up in all of these diseases that we're talking about? A lot of these things are related to the way that our immune system is functioning. So let's go back for a second and let's talk about what this means. Let's take these sentences and break them down for a second. So it says here, the resident macrophages serve to protect the lung from foreign pathogens. What does that mean? Okay, macrophages are basically, let's just call them to understand them, they're white blood cells. They're part of our immune response. They do several other things. They also respond very tightly to insulin. And insulin, whether you got in glucose levels in your bloodstream. But macrophages in different areas of the body might be called something different, depending on where they are in the body. So, like it says right here, tissue-resident macrophages are different from monocytes that come from the bone marrow and circulate in the blood. Different tissues have specialized tissue-resident macrophages, including Kupffer cells in the liver, adipose tissue macrophages, ATMs, and the adipose tissue, alveolar macrophages in the lung, red pulp and marginal zone macrophages in the spleen, and microglia in the brain. In the brain. So they're depending on where depending on where the macrophages are, they might have a different name. But that's basically that's what they do. They're protected. They're looking out for bad things, and they're trying to keep your body clean. They're trying to protect you from viruses, from bacteria, from different things, from cells that are about to die. There's lots of functions of those right there. But this one is saying that the resident macrophages serve to protect the lungs from foreign pathogens. It's exactly right. That we have macrophages in the lung that are there. They're there and they're ready to fight off whatever it is that we are about to face. Okay? Ironically, the inflammatory reaction triggered by these very macrophages is what is responsible for the histopathological and clinical findings seen in pneumonia. That sentence is vitally important to understand. The inflammatory reaction triggered by these macrophages is what's responsible for pneumonia. That's what the article says, and that's what I'm trying to say tonight. It's not the virus, it's the host. And to be fair, I really don't want to be specific about this particular incident that we had this week because I don't know anything about this poor child, and I don't want to talk about the child or the family or in any means at all. But I want to let's talk about older people that get pneumonia. Let's say you're getting to be 80 years old and they're afraid you're going to get pneumonia. Or let's talk about the people that went through COVID that got pneumonia. Like you present COVID to 500 people and 5 people get pneumonia, or 10 people, or whatever the number is. How come those 10 got pneumonia and the rest of the 490 of them didn't get pneumonia? It was the health of the host, right? Because what this article is saying right here is that the inflammatory reaction triggered by the macrophages is what is responsible for the histopathological and clinical findings in pneumonia. Okay, why? Why is it responsible for pneumonia in some people, but it's not responsible for pneumonia in other people? We've got 2 things in common so far that we're talking about. Number one, first thing in common is that we get exposed to the virus, whatever the virus is. There's an exposure we get, okay? Number 2, We all have resident macrophages in our lungs. Okay, there we go. That's 2 areas right there. You know what else we have in our lungs? We have glutathione in our lungs. So now we've got, let me find it. So here it is, glutathione. Glutathione, and I'm not going to go into that's is the cell's principal mechanism of eliminating reactive oxygen species, which is antioxidants eliminating free radicals, right? It's basically what it is. That's why it's so important inside the cell. We've talked about that a bunch of times. Inside the cell in the mitochondria produce the free radical, which is the reactive oxygen species, and the glutathione helps neutralize that inside the cell, and it keeps the mitochondria protected. Okay? Glutathione is synthesized in a 2-step process using glutamine and cysteine, and this is the rate-limiting step. Let's keep going. We get down here a little bit further. Let's just go on down to the part that I wanted to talk about anyway. And this is, because here's a whole list. Glutathione in prokaryotes, glutathione in tuberculosis, glutathione in HIV and AIDS, glutathione in cystic fibrosis, glutathione in diabetes, other viral infections. Many of the mechanisms of viral pathophysiology involve an imbalance in the redox balance of the cell in favor of oxidative stress. What does that mean? That most of the mechanisms of viral pathology involve an imbalance of reactive oxygen species. Too many of those and not enough glutathione. We've got the wrong balance going on right there. It's the disease physiology inside the cell. Many of the mechanisms of viral disease physiology involve an imbalance in the cell in favor of the free radical, with resulting dysregulation of the glutathione. Glutathione in the reduced form is the major intracellular redox buffer. It's the one that it's setting off those reactive oxygen species and plays a critical role in protecting cells against damage from oxidants and viruses. In vitro, the cell culture studies of viral infection show that oxidative stress and a decrease in intracellular glutathione occurs in the host cell after infection with viruses. So if we don't have enough glutathione and we have a viral infection, we're going to have an imbalance right there, and we're going to have a viral pathophysiology, a disease process that's going on inside of our lungs because we don't have enough glutathione inside of our lungs to protect us from whatever that invading species might be. And that original article we were just looking at is saying that what are those things, and what are the things that cause the pneumonia? The bacterial causes, viral causes, fungal causes, hospital-acquired pneumonia, and ventilator-associated pneumonia. Those are all things that are on the list right here that are of reasons that we could have pneumonia. Okay, but one of the things that's really, when we're talking about health, what I'm trying to say is we have a cell. We have a cell inside the lung, and inside that cell, we have glutathione. And around that cell and inside that cell, we have macrophages. And we have a defense mechanism that is there and ready. Okay? And then what's going to happen is we're going to have a response. So if we say the role of macrophages in the resolution of inflammation. So this is an article. This comes from the Journal of Clinical Investigation, published in the American Society for Clinical Investigation, founded in 1908. I got this on PubMed, National Library of Medicine. Let's just talk about this for a second. Macrophages are a tissue-resident or infiltrated immune cells critical for innate immunity, normal tissue development, homeostasis, and repaired damaged tissue. Macrophage function is the sum of the local environment in which they reside and the type of injuries or pathogens in which they are exposed. They are innate immune cells present in every tissue and necessary for homeostasis. So they're in the tissue. Your white blood cells, your immune system, they're in the tissue and they're ready to go. Okay? And they're going to respond. And one of the things they're going to do when they respond is they're going to attract other white blood cells into the area, especially neutrophils. And when we get back from the break, we got to take a break right now, but when we get back from the break, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you exactly what happens that when we have this reaction of macrophages inside our lung, and we have this lack of glutathione inside our lung, and we have this overreaction, and we have this increased amount of neutrophils, how our lungs will fill up, and it's our immune response that's responsible for the pneumonia. And then we have a better understanding of how we can actually make good choices with our health that keeps us from getting pneumonia. Because we just think it's just unfortunate that we just got pneumonia, and that's not true. It's not that it's just, I mean, it is unfortunate, but it's not because we didn't have a choice, right? You guys stick around. We'll be right back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. Yeah, for all the social media people out there, I'm sorry about last night. I don't know what happened. We didn't have the show on Tuesday because I was speaking over at the WISE group, and we talked about the brain and love. And then last night just started the show, and I don't know if I hit a button or caused some sort of malfunction, but I'm sure it was my fault. And then I tried to fix it last night, and I couldn't get it fixed, and then so we lost the whole show. So I apologize for that last night. I appreciate you guys listening tonight, and I hope some of this is going to make sense. No one else wants to talk about it, so we'll talk about it, and then we'll just be healthier, and we'll understand it, and then you won't get pneumonia. Whoever you are that's listening to this show, you won't get pneumonia, and maybe you could control it in your children as well, right? And maybe someone it's like, why doesn't everybody in town know this? Why doesn't everybody in my town and everybody in your town and whatever town that everybody else is in, why don't everybody in town just know this like it's just common knowledge? Like it's just like, oh, dude, well, I knew that. Like, just take your fish oil, decrease your inflammation. Like, don't take any acetaminophen. That's the next thing we're going to get into. I'll just show it to you while we're waiting. Just ask the question. Acetaminophen decreases intracellular glutathione levels and modulates cytokine production in human alveolar macrophages and type 2 pneumocytes in vitro. Yeah, it decreases intracellular glutathione levels in your lung, like in human alveolar macrophages. It's like, why? Because glutathione is what your body uses to detoxify you from acetaminophen in your liver. And if you get a high fever, what are you going to do? What are you taught to do? Take a Tylenol. And what are you going to do? You're going to take the glutathione off your lung because your fever got high. And then what's going to happen? We're not going to get that virus handled inside your lung quick enough. So now we're going to have this overreaction with our immune system, and we're going to have too many white blood cells coming into the lung, and that neutrophil is going to bring plasma, and then we're going to end up with too much fluid in our lung. We had this conversation back during COVID. We talked about it during COVID, and we talked about it on the show in 2023 when we started this deal, right? And it's never going to go away because it's human physiology. I didn't even share that with you. Yeah, I did, right there. It's human physiology. It'll be here in 100 years and 1,000 years, unless some AI thing fixes everything, and then we just, no more physiology. Okay, everybody, we're back. We're talking about what's going on inside the lung whenever we're trying to to fight off an infection. So the first thing we did is we talked about the macrophages are there, right? The white blood cells are there. Okay. Then what happens is they're going to release, well, let me show you this right here, because I put together a whole bunch of notes, okay? I put together some notes today to try to make this make a little bit more sense. I am actually trying to make it make sense. So I put these notes together. I know you guys can't see them too well, but I'll just read through them so that you can kind of understand them. So it says this, at the molecular level, and this is, we're talking about insulin, okay? This is another thing that you can control, but I want to read this because I want you to understand the difference between an M1 type macrophage and an M2 type macrophage. But at the molecular level, insulin resistance is promoted by a transition in macrophage polarization from an alternative M2 activation state to a classical M1 activation state driven by NF-kappa B and API and other signals-dependent transcription factor that play crucial roles in innate immunity. What does that mean? Okay, what is a M2 activated? What it's just saying is this. The macrophage is a very dynamic cell. It has the ability to change function. It's like a great athlete. You could play him at point guard, or you could play him at forward, or you could even move him into the post, kind of like Magic Johnson. Like you could just put them all over the court because they just have such great ability. That's kind of what a macrophage is that it's a cell that has the ability to change. It's very dynamic, okay? And the M2 activation is induced by fungal cells, parasites, immune complexes, complements, apoptotic cells, macrophage colony stimulating factors, interleukin 4, 13, and 10, and a bunch of other things, okay? The M2 macrophages have high phagocytosis capacity, producing extracellular matrix components, angiogenic, which means blood vessel building, and chemotactic factors, and interleukin 10. In addition to the pathogen defense, M2 macrophages clear apoptotic cells and can mitigate inflammatory responses and promote wound healing. That's what I wanted you to know right there. The M2 macrophage basically turns down the inflammation. Okay? The M2 macrophage turns down the inflammation. The M1 macrophage is the opposite. It is induced by intracellular pathogens, bacterial cell wall components, lipoproteins, and cytokines such as interferon gamma. That's interferon gamma. That's what we talked about last week. And tumor necrosis factor. The M1 macrophage are characterized with inflammatory cytokine secretion and production of nitric oxide, resulting in effective pathogen killing mechanism. So this M1, when that macrophage sees this pathogen right there, this intracellular pathogen, this bacterial cell wall component, now all of a sudden, it's characterized with inflammatory cytokine secretion. So what does that mean? All right, you got this chilled out macrophage that's in your lung right now, that's just chilled out. It's just cleaning things up. It's keeping the inflammation down, and it's just chilled out right there, okay? Then all of a sudden, you've got some sort of bacteria that shows up in your lung, or you got a virus that shows up in your lung, or something like that. Well, all of a sudden, it's going to switch. It's going to switch from an M2 to an M1. Now it's serious about its business. We're fixing to do some killing right now, right? So it switches over, and it increases that inflammatory response. It starts releasing chemicals in the lung that increases the inflammatory response. And it releases cytokines. And the thing that we're trying to stop is we're trying to stop what's called the cytokine storm. We don't want, like, you guys that aren't in Lubbock, like, we have this thing that happens in Lubbock, especially, and they even said maybe it might happen tomorrow because the wind's supposed to blow or maybe something. But when in the springtime, when there's no cotton in any of these fields and all the fields are just dirt and the wind starts to blow, all the sky turns brown around Lubbock. And if it blows really hard and we get this big wall of it, they call it a haboob, right? That's a new thing for a dust storm that we didn't ever call it that before in Lubbock, but we call it that recently. There's this big old giant wall of dirt that just covers us. You can look it up on YouTube, right? Okay, imagine that is a cytokine storm. The haboob is a cytokine storm. Cytokines are chemicals that are released that are working to do multiple things. Well, one of the things that they do is they're trying to recruit other blood cells into the tissue. And this is our pneumonia. And this is where we get into this whole, when you start talking about neutrophils. And what does a neutrophil do? To mitigate out of blood vessels into inflamed tissues, blood cells must cross both the vessel endothelium and basement membranes. According to a couple of these guys, protein-sparse exit sites in the basement membrane pave the way for this cellular escape. So what's going to happen? The neutrophil is going to exit the vein through the protein-sparse regions in the basement membrane of the blood vessel. The neutrophil is going to morph itself. It's going to hit that where those cells come together, and it's going to morph itself, and it's going to leak. It's going to come through the blood vessel, the small blood vessel. In this particular case, the vein. It's going to come through there, right? Well, what did our original article say right here? It said this in turn causes inflammation of the lung tissue and makes the lining capillaries leaky. See, now we're gonna create this inflammatory response that's going to make the blood vessel leaky, and that's part of the inflammatory response is the cytokine storm. It's the cytokine being released that's going to bring the white blood cell, the neutrophil, into the fight. It's like I got to call up my buddies on the phone and say, "Hey, I need some help over here." So I'm in a fight right now. And that's what it's going to do is it's going to bring them in. So now what happens? When they get through the cell wall, when the neutrophil works its way through that cell wall, it brings plasma with it. Okay? It brings plasma with it. And when it brings plasma with it, the plasma, have you ever wondered, like when we talked about this, I know you guys on the radio heard this last night, but have you ever wondered where does the fluid come from that fills up the lung? When you have pneumonia is this immune response that ends up in your lungs. You got too much crap in your lungs, right? Where does that come from? Like you didn't breathe it in. You didn't swallow it. Think about that. If you get sick and you start coughing up all this stuff, right? And you can feel, you can hear it, you can wheeze, right? You put the stethoscope or you put your ear on your child's lung, or you put it on their back and you can hear it in their lungs, and they'll be wheezing, right? That fluid is in there, in that tissue, in the lung, and you're breathing through all that fluid. Do we ever wonder for just a second, where does the fluid come from? How did the fluid get in the lung? Where is that happening? Why is it happening? Because we didn't pour the fluid in the lung, right? We all know that that's true. We all know that the fluid did not come from outside in the environment. The fluid came from inside our bodies that got into our lungs. We didn't swallow a bunch of water and it went down the wrong pipe and now it's stuck in our lung, right? We know that for true. That's true. So where did it come from? It came from the blood supply and this whole fight that's going on that's with these macrophages and these neutrophils and the glutathione against the virus or the bacteria or whatever that it's fighting against, that whole fight that's going on, and the leakage of the leaky capillary into the lung. Because when the neutrophil comes to the party and it slips through that capillary wall, it brings with it plasma. And I know you're like, okay, dude, I got it. You said it. I understand it. So what are you saying? Like, okay, what's your point, Jason? What's your point? Okay, here's my point. That this what we're talking about is an overreaction of the immune response. So what I'm going to present for consideration is this. I'm going to present the idea of what is your status of inflammation when you get exposed to the pathogen. Okay? And where are you already? So if this is the alveolar sac, and it's got these little cells in it in your lungs. And now this is the air, so oxygen is coming in, and the oxygen comes into the lung, it hits that, and then you've got a blood vessel, a capillary, that's running next to it right there. And then now what we end up with is the plasma leakage through the blood vessel basement membrane when the neutrophil ends up in there. So the plasma leaks through there, it leaks into the lung, and now we get a filling of this alveolar sac with too much fluid. And now we can't get the oxygen exchange done, and then it sets our body off into all kinds of bad things happening. Right? Okay. The presentation is the status of the host. The status of the host at the time of infection. Okay? What is the status of the host at the time of infection? Is the host inflamed? Let's just say that there's an increased amount of inflammation. And you say, well, okay, do you have any examples of that? Can you show us what that might mean? I can. I could talk about that level of inflammation. That is happening. Let me see here. I don't have it open, but I have it on my notes somewhere. Let me read this little sentence right here. Adding omega-3 fatty acids to the diet resulted in a decreased M1 macrophage and marked increase in MGL1 positive M2 macrophages in these particular mice. Okay? What this is saying right here is when we add omega-3 fatty acids, we decrease the M1 macrophages, the killer macrophages, the inflammatory macrophages, and we increase the M2 macrophages inside the tissue. So let's just reverse engineer that right there. And let's just say, okay, well, if we take omega-3s and we decrease that, then what is it decreasing from? It's decreasing from the level of inflammation that's going on when you get sick. If your body, here's what I'm saying this. I'm not saying it all that great, but I am saying it. What I'm saying is that the level of inflammation you have at the moment that you're sick has a lot to do with the outcome of the sickness. The higher the level of inflammation, the increased number of macrophages, especially the M1 type macrophages, the ones that release the cytokines. And when they release the cytokines and the chemokines, what you get is you get an increased amount of neutrophils. So you get an increased amount of neutrophils because you got an increased amount of macrophages, because you got an increased amount of inflammation. Because inflammation is what? Inflammation is the immune system. So if you're inflamed and you have high levels of inflammation, then what you have is you've already got your immune system turned on. Does that make sense? Inflammation is the immune system. If you've got inflammation, if you've got an increased amount of inflammation in your body before you get the virus, you already have your immune system turned on. What is the problem that we're dealing with pneumonia? It's an overreactive immune response. Part of the reason that it's overreactive is because it's already reacting before we get sick. That's the problem. That's what separates the difference between the 500 people and the 10 people, the 490 people and the 10 people that ended up getting pneumonia and the 490 people that didn't get pneumonia. That's one of the differences. It's not the only difference, but it's one of the differences between the two groups of people. That some of those people had a lower level of inflammation than the other people. That's just one thing. I'm not saying it's the complete picture, but it's just one thing. It's one thing from a health and wellness standpoint that we actually do have control over. We can decrease our inflammation, which is our immune response, in every pathology that we have. Like MS, multiple sclerosis. Yes, I'm talking about multiple sclerosis. I'm talking about Lou Gehrig's disease and ALS. I'm talking about cancer. I'm talking about, have you guys heard about this whole thing with ivermectin and fenbendazole or whatever that stuff is called? And what is that going to do? What is that going to do if they're saying that there's some cancer mitigating qualities to that? It's going to decrease some cancer. How's it going to do that? It's going to decrease the immune response. That's what, because it's going to decrease the pathogen or whatever the signal is that's causing the immune response to be high. So when we measure omega-6-3 ratios in people, we get the average American. Remember, what is the average American 6-3 ratio? Omega-6 to omega-3. It's 25-1. What does that mean? Don't you remember our pathway of omega-6 goes to arachidonic acid, which goes to prostaglandin E2, which is inflammatory? When you have an imbalance between your 6-3 ratio, you have an increased amount of inflammation, right? So we've got all these people that are above 10 in their 6-3 ratio, and we got them up in the 20s and we got them up in the 30s. And then now, what does that mean? They're already inflamed when they get the virus. So now what happens? If I have an increased amount of cytokines, I'll have an increased amount of plasma. Does that make sense? I mean, that's why I say it's not the virus that creates the pneumonia. It's the immune response that creates the pneumonia. You can't control the virus. You can get vaccinated if that's what you want to do. And yes, in this particular case, the vaccination it will probably do wonders for this particular event. Yes. Does the vaccination sometimes cause other problems? Well, we read that last week, right? In the inoculated book, in the plague book, and all those different things. There's some hard scientific evidence that, yes, there are some consequences to the vaccines. I'm not saying that. I'm reading it, right? So And it's not my game either way. What I'm saying is that what is the best thing? Because I heard a pediatrician get on social media yesterday. He said the best way to protect yourself against any virus, he was talking about measles, but he said the best way to protect yourself is to get vaccinated. And I think the best way to protect yourself is to be healthy. That's my thing. I think the best way to protect yourself from cancer is to be healthy. I think the best way to protect yourself from getting dementia and Alzheimer's disease is to be healthy. And I think there's a connection between health and lack of health and these problems. And I think immune system is one of the strongest things. And I didn't always know this information, but I believe it now. And I've gotten it shown to me. We have got to control our immune response. And you could do it on Hashimoto's disease, and you could do it on Graves' disease, and you could do it on, go through the list. All the autoimmune diseases, my dad had it. Remember I said that last week about my dad and ankylosing spondylitis, an autoimmune disease? And it's like, yes, autoimmune. The immune system is out of control. And what can we do? What can we do? What are some of the things that happens to us? What causes us to have these bad reactions to these viruses? What is there anything that can happen? It's just like, bam. I mean, knock on wood, how many viruses have I been exposed to over the wintertime? I've been right here with you every night. I had maybe one little day, and I think I had too much. I must have got some perfume or something on my from adjusting somebody, and I had a little bit of a sniffle. How many times have I been exposed to a virus and then come here Monday through Friday right here and talk to you about, I didn't take any days off because I was sick. Well, how come if I got exposed to a virus that I didn't have these overreactive problems? I could tell you one reason that, and it's not by just pure luck. And it's by the fact that one of the things you can do is take your omega-3 fatty acids. What did the article say? It said adding omega-3s to the diet resulted in a decreased M1 macrophage and an increased M2 macrophage. That's right there. 4 hours of omega-3 significantly attenuated the macrophage TNF alpha production, the inflammatory production of the macrophage. This data support the contention that anti-inflammatory effects of omega-3 fatty acids occur at least in part through the inhibition of macrophage tumor necrosis factor alpha production in response to an endotoxin. Further studies to define the anti-inflammatory mechanisms of omega-3 on macrophages are warranted. They did some pharmaceutical thing just because they trying to make some money out of it right there. But that's one of the ways. Another way that we can control it is another thing that releases cytokines is the macrophages in adipose tissue. Preventing the accumulation of adipose tissue macrophages during obesity can inhibit the development of inflammation and insulin resistance. One of the hallmarks of obesity-related chronic inflammation, just the fact that that's a term, obesity-related chronic inflammation, one of the hallmarks of that is the accumulation of adipose tissue macrophages. Macrophages account for approximately 10% of white adipose tissue in lean mice and humans, compared to nearly 40% in obese humans and over 50% in extremely obese people. The more body fat we have, the increase in adipose tissue macrophages we have. So the increase in cytokine release that we have. Tissue-resident macrophages are different. I read that one right there. M1 to M2 polarization is a dynamic process that can be reversed under physiological and pathological conditions. Yes, we can turn it from M1, which are killer, into M2, or we can turn it from M2 into M1, depending on the environment that we're going to put that macrophage in. And what I'm saying is that if we will control our omega-6-3 ratio, we will control our insulin by keeping our glucose levels lower, by eating whole foods, by eating meats and vegetables, eating berries over fruit, and eating nuts from a tree, and not drinking sweet drinks. We can decrease our inflammation. Our vitamin D levels are important. Our sunshine is important. Our omega-3 levels are important. The food that we eat is important. When we eat ultra-processed foods, we increase our inflammation. Then we increase the chances of having a worse outcome whenever we get exposed to a virus. I hope that wasn't offensive to anybody. I hope it was just simply educational to you. You can control your immune response by keeping your immune system, by keeping your inflammation levels down. It's one of the most important things that you can do for your health and the health of your children. When we feed our kids processed foods and full of sugar and drink them, they get Cokes and they get ice cream and they get all that crap, they're increasing their inflammation and they're decreasing their chances of handling it when they get exposed to a virus. You guys have a great night. I'm out of time. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if it wasn't. And otherwise, you guys have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow night at 6.